we, the people of the United States, to form a more perfect union, secure the blessings of liberty, reestablish the meaning of the Constitution. Hello, friends, and welcome to We the People Show. I hope y'all, this is your host, Tiger, and I hope y'all had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and welcome back, Bradley.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
First of all, on the agenda, I want to talk about this election, this White House dispute. Yes, y'all, I know y'all are thinking, telling me, hey, concede already, but, I am actually prepared for two scenarios. Prepared for 4 more years in case the legal battles went through for Trump, but I'm also prepared that it might not, and Biden will be sworn in next year, but who knows? And it all comes down to these 6 states, all the lawsuits. It's just complicated. But, some sources say Trump, others say not enough, but I'm not talking about mainstream media and Fox here. I'm talking about independent sources. So yeah, I am prepared for both scenarios. I'm not going to play around with any further of the 270 simulator because that's just redundant now. So as for now, the Epoch Times We the People Show stands with we fight for election integrity. Of course, I personally will want a Trump to win, but it's not guaranteed. So Bradley, what would you say? Your thoughts?
Well, even though Trump hasn't officially conceded yet, I did hear that today he allowed the transition team to cooperate with Biden, so that could be a potential sign that he's about to. But again, we're not quite sure yet.
Yes, in his statement, he specifically said he's still fighting for the legal battles while also allowing Biden to proceed with this transition. So I got a feeling he's also having the same mindset as me, 50-50, or accepting any outcome.
Yeah, which I think is the right thing to do for him, just in case. Even if it is a slim chance that Trump will pull through the election, it's he's trying.
Yeah, he's trying at least, but hey, and at the end of the day, y'all, election integrity is the most important, regardless of what outcome. It's just disgusting. You have reports from Wisconsin, as a matter of fact, Bradley. Source Charlie Kirk show. Now, I don't listen to Charlie Kirk all the time. There are times where I question his credibility. But anyway, he reported that he heard that there were mentally disabled people taken advantage of. That's granny farming, and so fucked up. And
yeah, that is really messed up.
Yeah, and it's one of the patients and sad that Biden won, and their therapist, I think. It's a whistleblower. The therapist was the whistleblower, and she said that she asked the patient, "Why did you vote for Biden?" And he was like, "Oh, one of the workers did it for us, handed a ballot already filled out." And so yeah, this is just messed up right there. And one of the key components of voter fraud exposed right there.
Yeah.
So anyway, the White House dispute, folks. We'll just have to wait and see next month in January. And as of right now, apparently Trump is leading, but it's not guaranteed again. We are prepared for a potential Biden administration.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I've already come to accept it just because I'm thinking of the likelihood, but Tiger's a little more optimistic than I am about it.
Yeah. Yeah, we shall see 4 more years or 4 years of us two personally mocking Joe Biden.
Well, yeah, well, if Biden does try to do any radical policies, of course, we should oppose him. Well, we should only be willing to work with him if he's willing to pass more moderate, reasonable policies. But
exactly.
Regardless, don't forget potential we'll have a red wave in the midterms, most likely, if Biden becomes president, or
And,
the Biden presidency.
and speaking of part of the red wave, we will get to that later on in this content. So anyway, yeah, the main reason why I am opposed Biden is foreign policy, China, CCP, Chinese Communist Party, their atrocities, their human right abuses. So that's why I believe Biden's just too weak on China. But in the end, foreign policy, it all comes down to we can't really do anything much about it, though, sadly.
Yeah, he's gonna have full control of that.
Yeah. But anyway, that, folks, is the White House dispute that we're not going to talk about much more anymore. Now, again, one, it's in-party fighting. First of all, the Democrats, you have AOC and the establishment Dems, I'll say. It's mainly a battle within the Democratic Party between progressives and the mainstream Dems. As you can see here, Senator Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, he opposed defunding the police and he denied that the party is socialist, but he is partially true, but it's just part of the radical wing. The radical members are socialist.
Yeah, well, I think he was trying to say was like he's not socialist and like he doesn't want the Democrat Party to be represented that way because he's trying to like hold it together like with the old school Dems.
Yes, and then AOC here just tweeting this childish photo of her glaring at him.
Oh yeah, so professional.
Yeah. So there's the Democrat infighting between progressive and establishment, but there's also an internal matter between the GOP as well. And here, the president of Turning Point USA, he's out in Georgia. I admire his persistence in fighting for election integrity, but then there's also like other Republicans. That Charlie Kirk's not the main point here. The main point is this guy, for example,
that responded to him.
Yeah, and called Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia a coward for not I guess trying hard enough in determining the results, like legal ballots.
Yeah.
The kind of an ironic thing is Brian Kemp, he ran in the governor's race in 2018 on the issue of voter fraud. And I guess
he was Secretary of State.
Like in a way, I guess some Republicans felt like he betrayed them, but I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, honestly, like a lot of the Republicans who are mad at Brian Kemp, like it's not very smart because you do realize y'all do realize that I think he was like one of the pro-Trump candidates that Trump. I think Trump picked him over the Casey Cagle in the Georgia runoffs in 2018. So Kemp is very much pro-Trump. So to say like, oh now like, oh he betrayed Trump by just because like Georgia had an outcome that y'all didn't like, that's just immature. And all you can do, the best you can do is just tell the I'd be more mad at the Georgia Republican Party for doing a very poor operation at mobilizing voters in 2020 and allowing Biden essentially to win Georgia. That's embarrassing. And then getting David Perdue into a runoff. Yeah, even though he did get the most votes, but still that shouldn't have happened. And I think we need to push them to do better next time.
Yes. So basically, both parties, folks, that's the main point here, are having their internal civil wars. I wouldn't say like civil war after this election cycle, like actual fighting. Of course not, but I see it as more of a national divorce. Like then there's divorce of two parties. Like it's kind of like an Inception situation.
Yeah.
So, which speaking of the red wave Bradley speaks of earlier, we're gonna analyze mainly on the Senate runoffs for Georgia. Now, I could pull up a Georgia map, but I pulled up the national map, the simulator, because it has an impact on the outcome post the Senate. And why the VP matters, because it's a tiebreaker, because as y'all can see, folks, it looks very much so that the Senate would likely tie if, assuming the two seats went blue. But we're gonna play out the scenario here. So let's say election outcome legal suits resolve and Mike Pence remains VP, and let's say the two Georgia seats still went red. Now that's definitely a GOP majority. And
Yeah,
let's say the transition went through and we see Vice President Harris, and we still see a Republican majority because her tiebreaker is not enough.
yeah,
And moving on, we have, let's say, Vice President Harris and the two seats that went blue. It's a tie, but technically Democrat controlled because Vice President Harris.
yes, and she's a Democrat.
Yeah. So that's the scenario so far, and I have more. And let's say Vice President Pence again, then we have remaining just two seats again. Just the opposite way. GOP control Senate, just Vice President Pence.
Yeah, yeah. So like, if Pence did remain vice president with President Trump, Republicans would still control the Senate with the 50-50 tie because Republican vice president's being a tiebreaker.
Yes, and Bradley, we'll just forget the vice president just seat itself. Why do you think like the Senate became 50-50, or it potentially would be?
Why it would potentially be 50-50?
Like, let's say the Democrats took the Senate seat, or yeah, Democrats, because if the Republicans win, like Purdue and Loeffner wins, there's no 50-50. But let's say Alsop and I think Warnock, I think the guy's name is,
Yeah.
they won. What happens there? Like, let's say not just Georgia, but the other Senate seats in the
Oh well.
50.
Well, that'd be as Republicans, and conservatives, we'd very much be in we'd very much be in trouble as a nation, in my opinion, because you would have Democrats controlling the House of Representatives, even though the majority shrank, they're still in control. And of course, Democrats would have control of the Senate because Vice President Kamala Harris would break the tie, and of course, Democrat President Joe Biden. So he'd be able to get not ever. He probably wouldn't be able to get progressive legislation through because, like, of course, you'll have Joe Manchin, who's going to probably break from his party 50% of the time. But they'll get a good chunk of what they want through, and that would still be bad. But with that said, Republicans would easily take back the Senate in 2022. But ideally, for these from 2021 to 2023, we wouldn't want Democrats to control the Senate because we'd be in big trouble.
The GOP, that is.
Yeah.
And there's also other scenarios, folks. Let's say Vice President Pence remains VP and you have a split Georgia seats, like say Senator Loeffner wins her runoff, and say Purdue lost his, and we have a half and half. That's still a Republican control.
Yeah, no issue. And with Kamala Harris, if you're vice president, Republicans would need to win at least one Georgia seat to maintain control of the Senate. They don't have to win both, but ideally they should try to win both.
Yeah, exactly.
They just need one.
As I pointed out, folks, the other scenario, Vice President Harris and the same thing, Loeffner and Ossoff, I think. It's still GOP control.
Yeah.
Then you have the other seat as well. Let's say Purdue wins, and then Loeffner lost hers, then still Republican control with VP Harris.
Yeah, that's a very possible scenario. Like, probably my top two most likely scenarios I think will happen. Probably number one would be Purdue and Loeffler win re-election in Georgia, and you have a Vice President Harris. And probably close to that would be you have Purdue wins re-election, but Warnock defeats Loeffler, and then you have Vice President Harris. So chances of like Republicans retaining control of the Senate, I still think are more in their favor.
I have one more, which kind of, I guess, folks prove Bradley's point. You have Vice President Pence and Senator Perdue, and then all of a sudden, somehow, Senator, the Democrat guy, it's still GOP control.
Yeah,
The last scenario, folks, I don't want to point out the split, like Democrats won one seat, and not both Georgia's Senate seat. So yeah,
yeah,
so folks, based on the notes I have here, given all the scenario, the split seat, the both seat win blue or red, and plus the vice president factor, whether it's VP of Pence or Harris, we projected 88% chance GOP hold Senate and 13% that Democrats control the Senate. Now, I wish we were being biased, but we're not. This is exactly what we calculated, assuming the runoff out or predicting the runoff outcomes and whoever is vice president.
yeah. I actually conveniently have some numbers.
All right, cool. Let's see it.
Yeah. So, well, actually, like, I thought I had Purdue's numbers, but I don't. I only have Loeffler. So, well, first I'll talk about Purdue real quick. So, as we all know, in the 2020 election, Purdue, he did get most of the votes, most of the percentage. He got 49.7 versus Ossoff, who I think got 47.9 or 48. So, if it were to if Georgia like had a plurality system, then Purdue would have won re-election for sure because he did get the most votes. But however, they have a runoff system where if you don't reach 50%, if neither candidate reaches 50%, at least 50%, it'll be forced into a runoff. So unfortunately, Purdue didn't make that 50% threshold. So now he has to run against Ossoff again, and that election will be January 5th, 2021. Now, with that said, I think Purdue will win his Senate election, given he won his election in 2014, and it's clear that most of the voters did want him. It just so happens he didn't get 50%. And not to mention, like, you had a libertarian candidate who I think got about 3% of the vote. The libertarian candidate will not be on the ballot in this runoff. It'll just be Ossoff and Purdue. And libertarians tend to be more right-leaning, so even if they don't like Purdue, I'd say at least 70% of them are still going to vote for him over Ossoff because at least Purdue's a little more pro-gun, pro-free market than Ossoff is. So I think he has the numbers in his favor there. Loeffler, I think, will be a little tougher to tell. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Warnock defeated her, given she's not very popular and she hasn't ever really won. She hasn't won a Senate election or ran for office, but it's possible. According to the special election numbers, some good news for Republicans is that if you combined all the votes for GOP candidates, because they had all the Republican and Democrat candidates on the same ballot, 49.3% of the votes went to GOP candidates versus 48.4% of the votes going to Democrat candidates combined. So Republicans have roughly a point edge for the votes for those candidates. So it's possible, but again, it's really close, so it's so hard to tell. And also there was a libertarian candidate that got less than 1% of the vote, and a few independents, and I tried to see which ones were left leaning, which ones were right leaning, which ones would probably vote for whom. About 0.7% of the independents were right leaning, and then 0.9% were left leaning. So I would assume the left leaning independents would vote for Warnock and the right leanings would vote for Loeffler. And after I combine the numbers and such, assuming that every single voter for those candidates would go to either Loeffler or Warnock, Loeffler would get 50.7% versus Warnock getting 49.3%. But again, that's assuming every voter would vote for those candidates, and that probably won't happen.
Well, it's always good to have an economist in our ranks, folks. And as for just as a lastly closing thoughts, Bradley, based on this results by county, we hope it's counting legal ballots, but
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, regarding Loeffler and Purdue's races, what do you think like the impact of who voted for president would impact on who would they vote for in the Senate runoffs?
Well, I looked at Purdue's numbers, and he got about 1,000 more votes than Trump did. And they were both Republicans. And Ossoff got 100,000 less votes than Joe Biden did, and they're both Democrats. So to me, that kind of tells me Purdue had was a more appealing to suburban voters, not as controversial, more liked, and the enthusiasm for Ossoff wasn't as high as Biden. So to me, it seemed more like the votes in Georgia that it looks like Trump lost Georgia. That it was more of an anti-Trump than pro-Biden vote. So, with Trump, like if it turns out he is a lame duck president, I think it'll be more favorable to Republicans because they're going to be more motivated to vote after they saw Georgia turn blue in the presidential level. And that tells you there was a lot of ticket splitting there. So maybe like you had people who voted for Purdue might have voted for Biden, and yeah.
And I got
And yeah,
these blue areas might indicate cities, and near cities should be suburbs, and then you have those again this national
yeah, because
election
in
for
the north,
suburban.
I was gonna say in the north, like that's where Atlanta is, and the metro and the suburbs. And Cobb and Gwinnett County used to be Republican suburbs, strong Republican suburbs of Atlanta, but now they've shifted Democrat because of a lot of them were turned off by Trump.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like suburban people are turned off by Trump's, I guess, temperament, something like that.
Yeah, and then those blue counties I think are African American majority counties, and they tend to vote Democrat.
Hmm. Well, I guess there we have it, folks. The potential predictions for the Senate runoffs, as well
Yeah,
as this reflection of the presidential race.
and just to sum up real quick, my prediction would be Purdue wins re-election, and when it comes to Loeffler, I really don't know. It's 50-50 for me.
So potentially Warnock could win. So we would have a tilt.
Yeah, it's very possible to have a Purdue Warnock victory.
Purdue,
But again, we won't know what happens. Don't again, guys. Don't act like polls are not a factor at all. Act like they're not, and just go out and vote if you live in Georgia. Vote, vote, vote.
vote, vote, vote.
Yes.
And let's say Bradley, let's say Bradley knows the future, and let's say he's right, and Kelly lost, and we have still a GOP controls Senate because VP Pence or Harris, either way, it's still GOP. That's 51 seats to 49.
Yes. No matter who the vice president would be, and if you had a split Georgia Senate delegation, like it, Republicans would still control it either way.
Right. And again, it depends on what type of legislation that the Senate looks at, because sometimes Republicans and Democrats would vote against what majority of their party would want to vote, yes or no, on a bill.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I guess the GOP and the Democrats stick to their decisions. Like, oh, all the GOP votes no on a bill and the Democrats vote yes. There could be those scenarios, but it's out of our control because we're not senators. Well, I am on a student government level, but that's not really a mock senate.
Yeah.
Well, Bradley, I guess that concludes this bonus content. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, all I can say is if you live in Georgia, once again, I encourage you all to go out and vote. No matter who you're going to vote for. And, no matter who you do vote for, remember it's going to be very consequential for who controls the Senate.
Yes. And as for me, the White House dispute, I am ready in a way to concede the election, but we just have to see what the legal decisions say when all those are resolved. I am ready for 4 more years or 4 years of mocking President Biden. And Senate, well, again, I encourage Georgians, y'all vote, vote, vote. And we shall see from there in future elections, which is the 2022 midterms and 2024 presidential election.